To get started. Good evening. Welcome everybody to the Simi Valley Interfaith Council monthly open house. My name is Stacy. I'm one of the participants in Simi Valley Interfaith Council, and we are being joined tonight by Alan Salazar. He is a tribal elder with the Chumash and the Fernando Tataviam. Is that right? Did I say it right? Tataviam Tribes. And he will be sharing his story with us and telling us a little bit more about spirituality in these two tribes and some of the rituals and other things that these two tribes, which are still very active in Southern California, where we are located, participate in. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Alan. Alan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Let me get started here. Hamanat Netawan Alan Salazar, Pasekva Nikasin. Shishalop Nukasin. Hello, I'm Alan Salazar. I'm from the village of Pasekva, what we now call San Fernando, California, and from the village of Shishalop, where I currently live, which is Ventura, California. I am a member of the Fernando Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, and I get my tribal ancestry from my father's side of the family. And we've traced back to the villages of Tuapu, right there in Simi Valley, which is a Chumash, Mediterranean Chumash village, and the village of Chugoyanga, which is in the Santa Clarita Valley. Magic Mountain is basically built over that village. My mom is mostly Portuguese and English and a few other European ancestries. But as you can tell by looking at me, I've always identified as an indigenous person. And I was raised, and the term used in the 50s, 60s when I was a young boy growing up was Indian. And my dad raised us, so I was raised as a tribal person, as Indian. That's who I am. But like I said, my mom is Portuguese and English. And I jokingly tell people all the time, when you look like I do, you have a hard time convincing people that you're English, but I have a little bit, and I'll share a story with you. I've been doing what I do, go around giving talks and lectures, doing storytelling for most of my adult life. And I tell people, people ask me all the time, when did you become an activist? When did you start getting involved in Native American issues and causes? And I tell them when I was 6 years old. Because when I was 6 years old, and when I say I was raised to be proud of my Indian heritage, and let's see if I have a picture of that. My father raised all of us. On my birth certificate, it says Indian. On my sister's birth certificate, it says Indian. My brother's, it says Indian, which is unusual for that time. So I was raised to be proud of my tribal heritage. This will start the conversation on interfaith. When I say I became an activist when I was 6 years old, this is why. This is me when I was 6 years old. That's me right there. The summer of 1957, that's my older brother. He was 10, and that's my pop, who was a Marine and fought in World War II. And when me and my brother asked to get Mohawk haircuts for the summer, he let us. And then when he got in the barber's chair, he got one too. And I always thought that was the end of the story. But my sister, before she passed, asked me, Alan, do you know the whole story of the Mohawks? And I go, no, tell me. And this is what she shared with me. My brother and I, when we were little boys, and this part I knew, the only Indian people we saw on television back in the mid 50s were Indians on television shows. And the ones that we watched the most were the Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone television shows. And the Indian men on those shows were Eastern tribal people, Mohawk, Mohegan, Iroquois. And the meanest, baddest warrior ones on those television shows were the Indians that had Mohawk haircuts and had tomahawks. And they fought everybody. They fought the American settlers. They fought the French. They fought the English. They fought everybody. And being a little boy, that's what I wanted to be like. So we asked for the Mohawk haircuts, and my pop let us get them. But what I didn't know, because I was just 6 years old, was a couple of weeks before we got the Mohawk haircuts, we'd gone to Mass, like many California tribal people. My ancestors brought to the San Fernando Mission starting in 1799. And so the family has been Catholic for many generations. And we were at Mass, and we lived in Hanford, California, where my mom is from, and it's a small farming community. We had a couple acres with horses and ducks and chickens and dogs. And my dad worked in construction. Those of you that are old enough to remember this, remember that when you bought a pair of blue Levi's, the 501s, when they were brand new, those were your good Levi's. That's what my pop wore to church, and a nice Western shirt and his good cowboy boots. Not his work cowboy boots, his good cowboy boots. And then when your blue jeans got washed 30, 40 times and started to fade, then they became work pants or play pants. And one Sunday, just before we got our Mohawk haircuts, as we were leaving, the Padre pulled my father aside, and my older sister, who at that time was, let's see, if I was 6, she was 14, 15. So she was old enough to kind of know what was going on. And she overheard the Padre say to Pop, Abel, when my male parishioners come to Mass, they usually wear a suit, or at least a nice dress shirt with a tie, and dress pants and dress shoes. And apparently my Pop nodded his head and thanked the Padre for sharing that with him. And 2 weeks later, we get Mohawk haircuts. My father says, wait before we go into Mass. He says, wait a minute. And we waited, and Mass was just getting ready to start. And he said, Alan, find us a spot in the front row. We usually sat in the back. When you're a minority, there's not too many brown people in Hanford in 1957. And my mother and father were one of the few interracial couples in Hanford, California. So everyone knew who we were. Small towns, that's the way they are. So I led us to the front of the church. Behind me was my brother with his Mohawk haircut, my mom and sister, and then Pop in the back with his Mohawk haircut, with a nice Western shirt, his good blue Levi's, and his good cowboy boots on. As we got to the front and sat down in the front row, my father knew that the Padre started Mass the same way every day. He would walk, the altar boys would be in front of him, and then the Padre would walk in, and the first thing he would do is he would bless the Jesus on the cross with holy water. And he would bless him, his head, his toes, his hands. And then he would turn around to greet his parishioners with his arms out. And when he turned around to greet his parishioners, they were sitting in the front row was little Alan Salazar with a Mohawk haircut, with a nice Western shirt on, my good Levi's. My brother, the same, my sister, my mom, and my Pop in his nice Western shirt with his good blue Levi's and his good cowboy boots. My sister said you could see the smoke coming out of the Padre's eyes through the whole Mass. When Mass was over, Pop once again said, just sit and wait. And we sat there and waited, and everyone left. And as the last person was leaving, Pop said, let's get up and go. And we walked up, we were walking back towards the front door of the church to leave the church. And the Padre was there greeting everybody, and we were the last ones. My sister knew Pop was going to say something to the Padre. And as my father went by the Padre, my sister said the Padre kind of turned his head to look away, hoping Abel Salazar would walk by. My Pop walked up to him, put his hand out, and grabbed his hand. My sister said she could see Pop squeezing the Padre's hand so tight that his hand turned white. And Pop pulled the Padre close to him and said, according to my sister, who I believe and love dearly, she said, Pop said, Padre, when I come to Mass, I come to ask for his guidance and his forgiveness. And then he let go of his hand and he walked away. That's the way I was raised. So when I turned 18 and graduated from high school, 3 days after I graduated, I was working full-time at Pacific Gas and Electric. And a week after that, I was in an apartment with a couple of friends that I went to high school with, and I was on my own. And I stopped going to Mass. Now, being a young man, I did what most young people do, and I worshipped Jimi Hendrix, I think, and Aretha Franklin, and the Rolling Stones. But later in life, ZZ Top. And then Sundays were spent worshiping power animals, spirit animals, like the Chicago Bears and the Philadelphia Eagles. But it was, I got older, I started researching and learning more about my tribal beliefs, the Chumash, the Tataviam. What were their religious beliefs? What did we believe? And I'll put it very simply, and then I want to open up for questions and answers. People have questions. If you have questions just about the Chumash or the Tataviam, how they live, doesn't have to necessarily be spirituality. About our tamals, I've been involved with our Chumash tamals and canoes, and built and paddled in them for a long time. But to put it simply, this is what I believe. That when you look at my tribes and their beliefs, and similar to a lot of tribes, and this is what I tell people, I am a person of the earth. I respect the earth and Mother Earth, and I respect everything on it. And I try and be as respectful as I can, even animals that I hunt. And my pop taught us how to hunt at a very early age. And by age 11, I knew how to hunt safely and pretty accurately with the .22 rifle. I knew how to skin and gut a rabbit, and I got my share of cottontail and jackrabbits. In my humble opinion, cottontails are much more delicious than jackrabbits. But even those animals, I respect them. And I thank them for giving their lives so that I can survive. When I collect my white sage to do in my ceremony, I always make an offering and thank that plant and thank Mother Earth for giving me that plant. When I end my prayers, I give an offering to the earth of tobacco, white sage, maybe cedar, old plants, because those are gifts from Mother Earth, and I give them back to her and thank her. I try and be respectful of all people and all beliefs. And on June 26th, we're hoping to have a live summer solstice prayer circle about Mount Pinos. Mount Pinos is the most sacred mountain for many of the tribes in that area. So the Kitanuma, the Tataviam, the Chumash, we'll go to Mount Pinos. It's the highest mountain in the region, 8,800 feet. And that mountain was just used for ceremony. So we've been going there for over 25 years, having summer solstice. In the last couple of years, we haven't been able to go because of COVID and fires and things like that. So we're looking forward to this June 26th, having a summer solstice prayer circle. And this is the way I run my prayer circle, and the spiritual people from Santa Ynez that come over and support us, from Bakersfield, we all believe the same. That when we set up our circle, we ask that everyone will have an opportunity to come into the circle. And we've made a circle, a big circle, 30, 40 feet in diameter. And we've taken rocks and made this circle. And then we've taken larger rocks and designated the 4 directions: the north, the east, the south, the west. Each one significant, each one having its own power, each one having its own symbolic gestures to get us through life. For example, the sun always rises in the east. That's symbolic of us starting a new journey, starting a new phase of our life, starting a new relationship, starting the day, starting the week. The sun always rises in the east. Sun always sets in the west, signifying the end of a journey, the end of a day, the end of a life, the end of a marriage, the end of a relationship. And we honor those things that happen to all of us in our lives. So we ask that when you come into the circle, that you make an offering of tobacco to the 4 directions, and you make an offering to the fire, to the center. With fire is symbolic of the sun in the center of our universe. Mount Pinos is the center of the Chumash universe. But then when you pray, we acknowledge that everyone prays in their own way. Even if you're a person of the earth, if you're a tribal person, Lakota tribal people pray, have their rituals and their way of prayer that are different than the Tataviam and Chumash. And I say, and this is what I usually say when I say, we ask you that you pay respect to our tribal ways and make an offering to the 4 directions into the fire. But you can pray to whoever and however you want. And to do this is okay in our circle, as long as you acknowledge our tribal ways. And I think, in my humble opinion, that is what has caused so many problems between the various religions. And that's why I was so excited to come to speak to this group, that the Padres felt, I had a very heated discussion several months ago with the Padre from the Ventura mission. Was Father Sarah as evil as many tribal people have the picture that we've painted of him? And the Padre said that he believed that an accurate picture of Father Sarah was not being painted. Father Sarah was a good man, but he didn't beat the Indians at the missions. And I said to the Padre, and this upset him greatly and ended our discussion. I says, you know, we can debate all day on what Father Sarah did or didn't do. But there's one thing you cannot debate or deny. And that is that Father Sarah believed the neophytes, the tribal people, the Indians on this land were inferior. And that rationalized and justified him forcing his religion on us, forcing us to stop speaking our languages, forcing us to stop practicing our religious ceremonies. And it's the one, in my humble opinion, and if I offend anybody, I do not apologize. I'm not going to apologize for what I believe in. You don't have to agree with it, and it may make you angry. But I think the one big flaw with Christianity and Catholicism is that you believe your religion is the only religion. Whereas what I believe is I have my personal beliefs and I have my personal religious beliefs, and I'm not going to force them onto anybody. And if you are Jewish, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Catholic, if you're a Christian, if you're a Buddhist, if you're an atheist, you are welcome at my prayer circle on June 26th. So I will open up for question and answers. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand or put the questions, I believe, in the chat. I think that's what we're going to do. And one of the people will read them to me.
Yes, we have already gotten a lot of questions going. So thank you so much. That was fascinating. I really appreciate learning everything that you have to offer us. All right. So one of the questions asks about annual events that you celebrate or observe aside from the summer solstice.
You know, it's kind of not very well organized, and it's one of the things that helps me sleep at night. That the younger generation is much more enthusiastic, much more organized, and more of our ceremonies are actually coming back because of the young people, not of the elders. You know, pulling the young people aside and saying this. But this pandemic, I know, has been difficult for many people, especially spiritual people. So we missed the spring equinox. So normally this last weekend, we would have been doing ceremonies to honor that it's spring, that things are awakening. It's a time for people to awaken and start to gather and to hunt and prepare. But one of the most important ceremonies, and to me, one of the most beautiful ceremonies that I've been blessed to witness and to be involved with, are bear ceremonies. So in the spring equinox, we wake up the bears, and we have bear ceremonies and bear dancers. And those are very powerful and sacred men dancers. They're usually all big men because they're bears. They have bear skins on them. And because the bear is the biggest, strongest animal, we believe that has healing power. And I'm not a big fan of mystical, magical stuff. I'm more of a realist and more grounded. So I tell people I've never dreamt of the white buffalo. I did dream of Betty White one time, but the young Betty White, not the Golden Girls Betty White. But bear, when you stop and think about it, bear is the biggest, strongest animal we have. So when we say bear has healing power, some of it, you know, some people try and take the mystical part of that, you know, this mystical power that bear has. But I look at it from a psychological standpoint. When you're weak and you're sick and you have the flu, if you're unfortunate enough to catch COVID-19 and you might be in the hospital for months, visualize something that is big and strong. In California, there was nothing bigger and stronger than the grizzly bear. That mental toughness that you know, there's not an athlete out there that has to first visualize hitting that baseball, has to visualize hitting that 3-point shot as the clock winds down. You have to be able to visualize it in your mind. So a lot of what our ceremonies are really that. And we have, some of us ourselves have made them more mystical to make ourselves sound important. But all 4 seasons are acknowledged. The winter solstice is the most important, the shortest day of the year. And you know, we do ceremony to honor the sun to make sure that it doesn't continue getting lower and the days get shorter and shorter. So we want the sun to start getting higher and higher, the days to get longer and warmer. But then, like any cultures, we do memorial services for when our tribal members die, and the Chumash believe that Point Conception, which is our farthest point on the whole West Coast, the farthest western point, that's where your spirit goes when you die. First, it spends 5 days visiting favorite places. So we would leave food for the people that had died. So ceremonies like that, naming ceremonies for the young, coming of age ceremonies. So I'm going to do, in the next 2 weeks, I would do a coming of age ceremony for my grandson. He's 12 years old. Wow. And when I was around 11, 12, my father gave me a hunting knife. And I didn't realize at the time, but what he was saying was, this is not a toy now. This is a knife. I want to show you how to use it. Use it if you're carving something. Use it if you're going to skin an animal. It's not a toy. You don't throw it at anything, at animals or people. It's a tool. So he was preparing me to go from being a child to starting to become an adult. So I want to do the same thing with my grandson. I'm going to give him a hunting knife. Then I'm going to take the time and show him, you know, how to use it. I will give him several other gifts. So those are some of the ceremonies. I'll try and be more brief on the next questions.
No, that's great. That's really helpful and very informative. It sounds like a lot of your ceremonies center on people's stages of life.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like that's really very important. Birth in different stages throughout a person's life, and then the death, the cycle of life. All right. Let's see. Do the Chumash have a main spirit or a main god that is above all other gods?
You know, I was with a group of college students from Cal Arts, and they were asking me about the Tamol or plank canoe, and where did we get the information for our canoe? And I said Fernando Lombrado. Fernando Lombrado was a Chumash elder that lived most of his life in and around the Ventura Mission. His family came from Limu, Santa Cruz Island. And besides his father and grandfather and uncles being master canoe builders, he was just a wealth of knowledge. And Fernando is quoted as saying, where someone asked him that question, and he said, we all have one mother, Mother Earth, and in the Chumash language it's Hutash. So Hutash is the Mother Earth spirit. And he says, and he did say, he says, we have, and I forget the words he used, but basically what he was saying was, you know, like a great spirit, that there's, you know, a spirit that watches over all of us. But we also believed, and I know this caused problems. And when I say that the Padres considered us to be inferior, the nature of Catholicism in the 1600s, they're not going to sit down and discuss with us anyway. But if they had, and we told them about the sky people, that we believe there's 3 levels to the world: the upper world where the sky people live, the middle world where we are at, and the underworld where there's supernatural scary things, what we call the boogeyman, Nunasashes. But when you stop and think about it, well, isn't that similar to what most cultures believe? You call the underworld hell or Hades, and you call the upper world heaven, and we just call it the upper world, and the middle world is where we're at, in the world of earth. The sky people doesn't mean that we felt the golden eagle is a god. We respected the eagle because the eagle flies higher than any bird. The eagle is a great hunter. So I think they confused worship with respect.
Yes, it sounds like it. And is it the same in Tataviam, the Tataviam culture, or?
Yeah, we pretty much believe, and there were several, probably dozens of Chumash elders that were interviewed. So there are literally millions of pages of historical notes, anthropologic notes about the religion, the language, our traditional ways of hunting and gathering, and beliefs and things like that. And because the Tataviam were such a very small tribe, our villages were around 100, some of them less than 100. So we're a very small tribe. It just wasn't that much recorded. But most people believe, and this is what I believe, and I share all the time, the more I've researched the tribes in this area, the more I see that they were connected and that they did ceremony together. So most people believe that it's Tataviam being neighbors of the Chumash, and from little we know is that the Tongva from Los Angeles, the Tongva Gabrielinos, the Tataviam, the Chumash, we all practice very similar religions. We had religious leaders. In the Chumash language, they were called the Antap, and each village had 12 spiritual leaders that would do ceremonies, and they would have different responsibilities. One might just all he or she took care of us was winter solstice. So we had our religious leaders, our religious beliefs, but I don't think the Great Spirit or whatever it was called was as revered as God or Jesus. So we were much more, I'm not sure what the word would be, but you know, Sky Eagle and Sky Coyote and the sun, Kakanamawa, Kakamanawa was the sun and was the leader of the sky people, and is different than the actual sun. Was a being. So I think equality might be the word I'm searching for. The powers and different levels were all kind of equal, all important.
Okay, thank you. Barbara Heath has a question about what is considered the age of maturity. Are there specific rituals for both young men and young women? What about rituals for birth, marriage, and death?
Well, I'm 70 years old, and my girlfriend is hoping that maturity is at 71. I refuse to grow up. Well, the thing with the pandemic, it's given all of us time to reflect. And like I said, I was thinking about this just a month or so ago, and I realized, I need to do something for my grandson, and he's 12. He turned 12 in October of 2020, which really in many tribal cultures is kind of late for that. But then when you look at the times, it wasn't unusual for women to be betrothed, to be married at age 13, 12, 13. And today, if a young girl is married to a 20-year-old man and she's 13, we're in an uproar. But it was different times and different customs. So 300 years ago, prior to the missions, I would have been doing this ceremony with my grandson probably when he was about 10. And when you look at even the missions, although at around age 10, we were starting to do ceremonies for the boys and girls to prepare them to go from being a child to starting to go into an adult. And we were just doing ceremonies for them, giving them, from little small spears to real, to take them out really to hunt, to teach them how to use the bow and bows and arrows and things like that. The missions, their policy was at age 10, the Indians that were brought to the mission, when the kids were age 10, they were treated as an adult. They stopped going to school. They worked a full day like an adult, so they were treated as an adult. So even within the Spanish culture, but I think that has a little bit more to do with they thought we were inferior. So once they were 10, there's no reason to waste time on trying to educate them. We didn't have the mental capacities to learn anyway, so let's put them to work at age age 10. So, but now within most tribes, it's around 12, 13, the ones that are still doing those sort of ceremonies. And I think when you stop and think about it, my father didn't do a big ceremony yet about it. I think it was either a Christmas gift or a birthday gift. It might have been a birthday gift. But he just took the time to explain to me, he showed me, how to use the knife, took me out and showed me how to safely use. I knew how to use a .22 rifle. I would go hunting by myself when I was 10 years old. And my mom's side of the family thought my dad was crazy and was a bad father for letting us do that. But as you can see, I have all 10 of my fingers, and I've never shot myself or cut anything off. So it did work in my brothers and sisters' case.
Wow. So I have a follow-up question to that. Are the girls allowed to hunt as well? Are they taught how to hunt, or are the girls, are they provided with other things?
Yeah. Ironically, when I tell people, when they ask what were the differences between the Spanish culture and the tribal culture, what was the difference between the American cultures and the tribal cultures? And really, when you look at it in retrospect, definitely the Chumash and Tataviam and the Tongva, like I said, those three tribes, they've traded and intermarried for thousands of years. So that's why there's a lot of similarities between them. We had a much more open society, a much more open culture, very similar to what our culture is today. So we just accepted the fact that marriages aren't going to be forever. That sometimes, a man falls out of love and falls in love with someone else, and a woman falls out of love and falls in love with someone else. And we have stories of the 7 boys who turned into geese. And the one boy was leaving his family because his stepfather, his new father, didn't want to share his food with him. And he told him, why don't you go have your real father feed you and eat his food. So the boy basically ran away from home. And so we have stories like that. We had a very open culture. And like I said, in my opinion, it's more similar to what we're like today. So we also were like that with the roles of male and female. If a woman was the best leader, we had woman leaders. We had woman chiefs. So I'm not sure in the Chumash. In the Chumash, the word for leader is wot, but in the Tataviam language, and I can't remember the words, but there's a word for a leader if he's a man, and there's a word for a leader if she's a woman. So we had both men and women leaders, and there were certain roles that were probably more traditional. So most of the canoe builders and most of the men that built, most of the people that built the canoes and were the fishermen were men. But there's stories of the chief's daughter taking her canoe out to go fishing one day, which means the Chumash women had their own canoes. The Chumash women would go out and fish, even though it was the brotherhood of the Tamil. So for the most part, we had a lot of the same kind of roles for men and women that the European and American and Spanish had for men and women. Men do this and women do this. Women do the housework, men go out in the fields. But in both the Chumash and Tataviam culture, if a woman was a better hunter, we're going to say, dude, stay home and pound those acorns. She's going to go out and hunt.
Excellent. And what about the religious leaders? Were they separate from the chiefs? And could a religious leader be a woman? Could a woman be one of the religious?
And it's a good example on the most part from what what we know from the elders like Fernando Lombrado that were interviewed, most of the on top, and that would be the word he used, most of the on top were men, but sometimes it was women. And like many cultures, a lot of it is handed down to children, but also, and I think it was more out of just necessity. So our villages are very small. Tataviam villages on average were 100. Chumash on average, the villages were around 300, with a few villages above 700-800 and a couple around 1,000. And those were in the Goleta, Santa Barbara area. But when you have a small village of 300, usually the Wote was also part of the Antap. So the chief was usually also a spiritual leader, one of the spiritual leaders. But for the most part, yeah, mostly it was men, but there were women spiritual leaders. And I think sometimes it had to do with, like I said, the Chumash, we've been here 13,000 years.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at, they're talking, and I heard on the news today, they're saying we're in another drought like we were 7 years ago, that our snowpack and reservoirs are so low that we're going back into the drought phase. But tribal people in California, we have literally gone through hundreds and hundreds of droughts, and hundreds of droughts way worse than anything we've had in the last 20 years. Oh, so gosh. During those times, they know populations went up and then down. Tribal life was very hard. And it seemed like those were the times that women leaders would appear. There'd be stories of women leaders. So during difficult times, and anthropologists will say it's because the population dropped, so there just wasn't enough men. The men going out to hunt were like, "Hey, you're the leader," But I think it has to do more with push come to shove. I heard a chief speak at Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, Orrin Lyons. He was one of the Eastern tribes, Oneida, one of those. And he said, at his tribe, the chief is always a man. But it's the woman elders that choose that chief. And the woman elders council has the power to remove that chief. So the women choose which man's going to be the chief.
Interesting.
And the women can say, you know what? You're not doing a very good job. You're out. Bring in the lefty.
Wow.
And I really like that. Okay, we're going to say men are the strongest, and men can talk well, but when it comes down to really making important decisions, let's let the women do it. Which one of us should be the leader? So I like that one.
Power to the women.
Yeah.
All right, we have a little less than 15 minutes, so a couple of more questions. Let's see. Wow. Wow, there are a lot. Okay. So I'm just going to throw out some questions and then you can answer as you feel. Were the Chumash hunter-gatherers moving within a certain area within the seasons? And also, what about the Tataviam?
Yeah, we were both very similar. In fact, and when you look at it, most tribes in California, so this is what I've been saying for years. And I've never had an anthropologist or an archaeologist go, no, that's not true. The Chumash, the Tataviam, the Tonga Gabrielino from the Los Angeles Basin, the Southern California tribes, were hunters, gatherers, and business people. And the reason I say business people is because we traded extensively with tribes all around us and villages all around us. And we would have large gatherings where tribes, neighboring tribes would come and stay for a month. And we would share ceremony, song, we would share things that we had in abundance and trade for things that they had in abundance. And our trade routes were extensive. And then when you look at the phrase I use is left-handed insult. So there's people out there that are masters at left-handed insult. Let me give you an example of a left-handed insult. And this one's very obvious. But someone will come up to me and go, "Oh, Alan, I have a nice denim shirt that you would look great in. And I think it'll fit you because it's too big for me. It's a 2X. Is that what size you wear?" And I'm 5'8" and I weigh 185 pounds. So that's a left-handed insult. I don't wear a 2X. I don't wear an XL. I wear a large. And if I can drop another 15 pounds, I'll be back into mediums again. But to me, saying a tribe were hunters and gatherers is a left-handed insult. California tribes were way more than hunters and gatherers. Our trade route were extensive. When they say tribes were farmers, they're saying is a left-handed compliment. They're a little bit more advanced. They're starting agriculture. They're diverting water and planting crops. We farmed the natural resources. The natural resources were so abundant, and we were so knowledgeable that we knew which plants that if we burned down some of the coyote brush and some of the coastal sagebrush, that the blue dicks and the rhodea are going to come back. And if you ever had rhodea roots, they're about the size of garlic and they have a nutty flavor. They're delicious. The island tribal people would burn every 3 or 4 years, and they would the blue dicks, which are beautiful flowers. So there'd be these meadows of acres and acres of these beautiful flowers. They'd go up and dig up the roots, and they're like, why mess with all this acorn stuff? That's way too much work, you know. So we farmed the natural resources. We never had forest fires like we have today because we were constantly thinning out all of our plants, the elderberry, the coffee berry, the lemon berry, the toyon. You know, we were constantly thinning those plants out, using the berries, using the branches, you know, making bows, making arrows, you know, making digging sticks, you know, ceremonial sticks, frames for our houses. So we're constantly thinning out. So the brush and everything was never that thick. When the brushes start getting too thick, we'd burn it ourselves. And you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look up in the sky and see those black clouds going, you know, we burn that stuff right now. It's going to rain tomorrow morning. We're good.
Right.
Which way is the wind blowing? It's going that way. We're good. So we managed fire better than the U.S. Forest Service manages fire today.
I believe
Yet we were classified as hunters gatherers. So left-handed insult.
Okay. So that's an insult to say you were hunters and gatherers.
Yeah.
Because you were so much more, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
because it was so much more than that. It was okay.
And most
because
tribal
it's
people,
not wrong.
I'm
right?
pretty sensitive.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify, it's not wrong that you were hunters and you were
hunters and gatherers.
But you were also, but it was much
business
more,
people, yes.
Right,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted some clarification on that.
Yeah.
Okay, Thank you. Your traditions and your ceremonies that have been passed down through the generations, are they mainly oral, or have any of them been written down for future generations?
Yeah, therein lies the problem. Like I said, we're an oral culture. So if it hadn't been for John Peabody Harrington, so if you want to Google somebody, John Peabody Harrington, it wasn't his intention, but he just kind of fell in love with the Chumash people and some of the local tribes, and just wanted to record as much as he could about them. But he just became so obsessed with it, he never wrote a book. And he literally has millions of pages of notes back in the Smithsonian.
Oh, wow.
And so if it hadn't been for people like that writing it down, now I tell people all the time, I went to Bakersfield Junior College. That's it. I went to 2 years of college. So I'm not going to impress anybody with my academic background. I can impress them with the things I have physically done. So the ceremonies I've been involved with. I walked from Ventura to Mount Pinos in 36 hours nonstop to bring attention to the sacredness of Mount Pinos. I've paddled in every crossing in our tamales, and we paddle on our knees in canoes that weigh 350, 400, 600, 800 pounds. Wow. It takes a tremendous amount of strength and endurance and practice anyone that paddles and outriggers or paddle competitively, it's like any sport. There's a skill, there's a mindset to it. I'm 70 years old, and I'm still one of the strongest paddlers that we have within the Chumash community. So I can match people on my physical accomplishments that I've done, the number of traditional houses I've built and things like that. But like I said, I academically, no, I have an AA degree. I'm not going to impress anybody with that. But our young people today, my Fernando Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, we have several tribal members that have bachelor's degree. We have a few that have master's degree. The Sandy and S. Chumash, they have a couple of their tribal members that are running their education departments that have PhDs. So we're getting there. We will do the research in the next 20 years. It won't be me. It'll be our younger tribal members that are way smarter and more intelligent and articulate than I am. And in the next 20 years, I hope my Tataviam language will be revitalized. We're working on it. We just started a couple months ago. But our education and revitalization of traditional crafts and traditional ceremonies and things like that are going to start being written down, recorded, videotaped, and it'll be passed on to my great-grandkids, even though I'm not here.
That's amazing. That's really great. Yes. Speaking of education, one of our participants would like to know, how can we include in the curriculum in schools that teach about Native American culture and the truth about Father Sarah and what he did to Native American or indigenous peoples?
Well, there's a couple things you can do. And I've been saying this for years. Schools need to invite the Alan Salazars of the world. So there's not a lot of us, but there's a handful of us. Our tribal president, Rudy Ortega, is extremely knowledgeable on our Tataviam tribe and goes to schools and speaks. We have several tribal members like that. Dennis Garcia, Ted Garcia, same thing within the Chumash community, Julie Tulamite, Del Benelos, Eleanor Fishburne, the Venturina Barbarena Chumash, and there's a handful of native educators, native people that know their culture. Invite them to the schools. All schools have monies for guest speakers and guest lecturers. So, you know, I may not have a master's or a PhD, but if you want to hear our side of what happened at the mission, what happened to my family, invite me to speak to the fourth graders. So you can do that. We are starting to write and publish our own books. So I have my first book out, and it's a children's book, but I'm working on a creation story, and I'm also working on a tribal history that is a simple tribal history of the Tataviam, because very few people know about the Tataviam. The Chumash were a larger tribe, and there's a lot of books out there about us. You can find them. You just Google Chumash books and they'll come up. But there's still not a lot of Chumash books about the Chumash written by Chumash people. And that's going to happen in the next 5 years. So I'm working on a history book for the Tataviam. I hope to have it out by the end of this year. I'll have a creation story out by the end of the summer, I hope.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So look for those. And then there's one more thing that you can do. And I think this is so important. Push for your schools, where your kids go to schools. Push for them to add California tribal history to the high school curriculum. So, and what I'm saying is right now, in our public schools from K to 12, there's only 2 grades where they study California tribal people. That's the 3rd grade and the 4th grade.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to have this discussion with this group tonight because this is an interfaith group, and I'm going to filter what I talk about as far as what happened at the missions. But I definitely can't talk to a 4th grader about how brutal some of the beatings were. Yeah. I can't talk to 4th graders about the fact that soldiers and some of the padres raped young women. I can't have that discussion with 4th graders.
Right.
But I can have that discussion with the high school senior, with the high school junior. Yeah. And just be, discreet. Right. I can't talk to a 4th grader about the bounty system. So how many people out there know about the bounty system? If you know about the bounty system, raise your hand, do that little hand button thing. And Stacy, tell me if there's any hands up.
Let me see. I don't see anybody raising a hand.
So the bounty system was in effect from 1849 to 1873. Our very first governor, Governor Burnett, proclaimed that he was going to exterminate all California Indians, and he would deal with the Indian problem by killing all of us.
Oh my gosh.
He established a bounty system. And from 1849 to 1873, California citizens, and there were vigilante groups and just California citizens that basically were hunting California Indians like we were deer. If they killed the California Indian and scalped us and brought the scalp in, they got a small bounty, $5 to $10. If they killed the California Indian and chopped his or her head off, they got a larger bounty, $20 to $25. There were several $100,000 paid out in bounties to private citizens and vigilante groups. Then the governor went a step farther. He asked the US government for several $1 million, which back then was a lot of money, and to fund a cavalry, a militia. And California had the highest paid cavalry and militia in the whole United States at the time. And they had one job, and that was to kill California Indians. And that cavalry militia and a few other of the vigilante groups, because they were doing it for bounties and chopping off heads, would go into villages and massacre the whole village. The stereotypical massacre that we think of just happening to the Plains tribes, where they wait through the night and around 3, 4 a.m. in the morning before the sun has come up, they attack the village while everyone's asleep, shooting and killing and stabbing with their bayonets everybody, old men, old women, little babies, dismembering them, chopping them up. There were over 300 massacres in California during the bounty system. One of the worst genocides in America. I can't have that discussion with fourth graders. And I have to even be careful on what we would discuss or even what would be included for the history teacher. But I just want to be at the table with the California State Department of Education and say, okay, let's put California Native American history as an educational component for the junior or senior year of all high schools. So they can learn what happened to California Indians. Because like I said, I can't have these discussions with third, fourth graders.
No, of course
not. Third, fourth graders, I just say, the priests were very mean and the soldiers were mean. That's literally all I say.
Yeah, yeah. It would be absolutely difficult to have a conversation like that.
Yeah. So if you ever see any books out there and it says the books are written by tribal people, and there's not a lot, but there are a handful out there. My dear friend Cindy Alvitri from Cal State Long Beach just published a book. Sorry, I don't know the name of it and where you can get it. But there are a handful of books. I have 2 in the works. If you want to write this down, if you can put it in the chat, or maybe I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I think you should be able to put it in the chat.
Where's the chat thing? Oops, I lost you.
It should be, oh, you know what? Here, I'll get out of it.
Add it in the chat if you want to say it verbally.
Well, I lost my
thank you.
Where'd it go?
It should be at the bottom of your screen. Chat, there should be a chat, but the little bubble says, did it disappear?
My computer is extremely slow. And I just lost the picture and everything, so.
Uh-oh, oh no. Mackenzie, do you want to go ahead and
you guys can still see me, right?
Yes, we can still see you. We can still hear you.
Will someone type this in for me? So just start typing as I'm saying it right now. www.SUNSPRITEHANDWORK.com. Sun, Sprite, Hand, Work.com. If you Google that, my book will come up.
Will there also be a way for people to get in touch with you if they would like to have further conversations with you, learn more about the different tribes and your life? Okay, great. It's we are coming up to, it's 8:07, so I just want to be really respectful of everybody's time and say thank you so very, very much to Alan for sharing his tribal history and information and a little bit about his background and upbringing, and really enjoyed having you with us. Thank you so very, very much for being with us, for talking with us about your 2 tribes that are so valuable in Southern California history and that are still going strong today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to doing this maybe next year live. I'm so looking forward to powwows and gatherings, although we are, and we'll find out here in the next few days, we are planning a summer solstice ceremony. We'll see if we'll be able to pull this off. We have summer solstice up at Mount Pinos, so I'll send someone involved with the group information on that once I know, once I talk to the district ranger and see if we can actually officially do that. But we're planning on having a summer solstice prayer circle where I said everyone's welcome into the circle, and all religious, all beliefs, and all tribes. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. All right. Yes, go ahead and send that information on to us, and we'll share it with everybody. Next month, Reverend Steve Rambo will be talking with us about the Center for Spiritual Living. That's April 22nd at 7:00 p.m. Connect with us on Facebook at Simi Valley Interfaith Council for all things interfaith related to Simi Valley. Our next meeting, like I said, is on April 22nd, and we just really encourage everybody to come out and join us on Zoom, join us on Facebook, and learn more about the faiths that make Simi Valley what it is. And again, a hearty thank you so much to Alan. I really enjoyed meeting you and learning so much about the Chumash and Tataviam Tribes. That was really splendid. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night, everybody.